You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week, we're joined by Vijay Ravindran, founder of Florio and an inspiring innovator in the world of autism technology. Vijay's journey as an autism father, combined with his impressive career at companies like Amazon and the Washington Post, led him to create groundbreaking virtual reality tools that are transforming how individuals with autism learn and grow. Today, we'll discuss how AI and VR are shaping the future of autism support. Welcome to the podcast, Vijay.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Well, one thing I'd love to be able to do is that a lot of times in our field is that we're driven by a personal story or an origin story as far as what drove the initial thought, the initial passion. Do you mind giving us a little bit of a background of what brought you into the field of technology with autism?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I've worked in tech all my career, starting as a software programmer, then as an early engineer at Amazon through the hyper growth years in the early 2000s, and then later as an executive at the Washington Post. And it was really during this time that my journey started. My son was diagnosed on the spectrum and has been through intensive interventions to help him. When he was 6 years old, he saw me experimenting with early virtual reality technology. At this point, I had worked behind the scenes on the sale of the Washington Post to Jeff Bezos and had continued with the Graham family that had owned the Washington Post up till that sale, operating a couple of businesses. And in this period, I started exploring the idea that I really wanted to figure out as a next act how to give back to the community that I felt, really part of. I've been in the waiting rooms, chit-chatting with other parents as our kids go through, over and over, hours and hours and hours of therapy and the frantic scramble to try to find solutions and the message boards. And so was really thinking about the space. And then this aha moment happened where my son requested to try out the VR headset. He spent time in VR, and it seemed to really spur some important developmental progress around pretend play. And that was the light bulb moment of whether virtual reality could be a new transformational medium for therapy. Florio started as a basement project. I put my own money into bringing in an engineer, 3D artist, started consulting with a developmental pediatrician and therapist to work on this initial concept that I started with a napkin design of, which was really predicated on this idea that VR could create immersive environments that create highly engaging opportunities to learn new skills. And then really the first thing I learned, experimenting with my son, was that I couldn't see what he was seeing, and that a critical piece of building something that could actually be used in the field was providing a mechanism so that a supervising adult can see what the child is seeing, puppeteer characters to create the social engagements that we're trying to teach on top of, and to be recording key data, knowing that, things like ABA therapy are data intensive and really require that component to be successfully implemented. And so all of those things came in to create that first version.
So, you talk about immersive technology, and I guess the question just immediately comes out in my mind is that when you think of a lot of treatments for autism, it's adult driven. There's a lot of that engagement, adult to child. What are some of those key benefits of creating this immersive environment? What is it bringing about that you might not have in a traditional therapeutic environment?
Yeah. So there's several things that are powerful about creating a fully immersive digital environment to teach skills with. One you referenced or touched on, which is that we can have the child practice skills with other child avatar characters that are at the age level, using language that is age appropriate, and behaving in ways that are different than adults, and so that's really a big benefit. You can create a lot of diversity in those characters. So that's the other thing, is that, it's not just the therapists are adults; they're, overwhelmingly female adults, and so being able to create, boys, girls, you know, gender and racial uh, diversity can create an environment that, in many ways, is more lifelike.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that you can, in these environments, recreate scenarios that are impossible to do in a therapist office or in a special education classroom. So, the one classic example that really helps drive the point home is learning how to cross the street. That there's some fundamental skills to teach there. Look both ways, verify that the cars are coming to a stop, walk briskly across. You don't need to run, but you don't want to walk too slowly. That there's audio cues around the sounds that the button makes after you press it, when it's appropriate to walk, and that those things can't be replicated. And the consequence of getting it wrong in the real world can be severe.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to teach that skill in a virtual environment, and having that child be comfortable to do in the real world, and having the adults be comfortable that the child has been able to demonstrate it virtually, is really powerful.
No, I mean, and just with the ability, I would imagine, to be able to control the pace of learning, that has to give I mean, not only the child, but the teacher a leg up in being able to develop more skills. It's that you can tailor it, you can slow down, the progress. We do that with communication. But it's even more important with social skills. You need to contact success. And so what's the role of the teacher in your product as far as being able to control the curriculum, control the pace of teaching and responsiveness?
Yeah. So the supervising adult, the coach, as we call it in our system, which can be a therapist, a teacher, a parent, they're using Florio and selecting the lessons. The first important piece, and this actually dovetails into hopefully a chance to talk about areas like AI that I'm very excited about, is you have to choose which lessons are appropriate for where the child is in this moment. And so knowing where they are, knowing what lesson could be of benefit. But then once you get into the lessons, there's several things we do to make it comfortable. One is that in the design of the lessons, that it's designed in a way that you can move as slowly or quickly as you need to based on the ability of the learner. And by that, at different points, the adult is cueing that next thing to happen after verifying that the child has successfully navigated a section of the immersive lesson. And that pacing can be controlled by the adult, which allows them to work with different support level children at different paces as appropriate. The second thing that we do is that we, in a number of the lessons, we can control the level of audio and visual distractions in the lesson. And so that can be powerful as well. So one of the things that we think helps a lot when you're trying to teach those skills early is to simplify the environment as much as possible so you can focus on the core skill, and then layer the distractions. So when you think about in traditional therapy, you might be in an office of a therapist, and there might be distracting things on the desk. The air conditioner might turn on and create a distracting noise. The kid in the office next door might be having a meltdown, and you're hearing the meltdown while trying to teach, right? So there's all these things that happen in the real world that actually get in the way of teaching the core skill in that moment you're trying to teach. Well, in VR, you can strip that all down and start very simple. And so we use very simple animations intentionally for earlier stages of development. And then we ratchet realism as appropriate for later stages. Teaching joint attention, you can use cute animals and just focus on engagement and the animation. Teaching how to cross the street or a law enforcement encounter or TSA lines, well, they're going to use more realism because there's a lot of detail that you want to convey.
Mm-hmm.
And so we use that as well to control. And then the supervising adult can also tailor the feedback they're giving to the child throughout this process based on their unique understanding of what motivates and successfully works with the child. So that's the other thing that's really important about what our vision is for Florio, is that Florio is not a replacement for the therapist. It's giving the therapist superpowers, and it's recognizing the fact that the adults working with that child do have unique knowledge that technology is not in a place to replicate today.
Mm-hmm. And I'd love to hear a little bit about the advisory team, or kind of the scientific background to, how you're developing these curriculums, who's helping to be able to bridge that gap. I mean, you talked about the benefit of generalizing some of these skills and being able to identify those salient stimuli in the environment, which means that you must have some clinicians that are helping to advise this process. Do you utilize the clinical staff to be able to support the technology as it's grown?
Yeah. So both internally and externally. So internally today, we have multiple BCBAs, a speech language pathologist on staff who are guiding the lessons, along with neurodiverse adults on staff who also are weighing in as we and participating in that building process. So we have a team internally building content who have a combination of lived experience and clinical expertise guiding that. Beyond that, and they're led by our director of therapy content, Marcia Stepensky, who's a BCBA. Beyond that, we have been leaning on the research capacity of both academic institutions and customers who have investments in the research component as well. And so, one of the early wins of the company was an NIH fast track grant with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which funded 4 years of research, including 2 randomized controlled trials. So it helped build an initial bed of research that is available on our website. We also partnered with the Special Education School in New Jersey's Celebrate the Children to run our first study on joint attention, which was published in the JMIR Pediatrics and Parenting. And then subsequent to that, more recently, we have worked with a number of organizations. In fact, it's quite flattering when we go to conferences like ABAI now, multiple organizations will be postering or doing talks on the Florio technology in the manners they research. So they've included organizations like Bancroft, Trumpet Blue Sprig, and more recently, we have been working with Center for Social Dynamics, Bierman, and then our significant research, which includes our FDA pivotal trials with Cortica. They were also the sites for our feasibility study that was used to submit for and receive FDA breakthrough device designation. And so they've all been very important. We also recently announced the formation of a scientific advisory board that is led by the chief clinical officer at Easter Seal Southern California, Dr. Paula Pompa-Craven. It includes 2 stellar independent advisors, Dr. Eldred Granger, who was Deputy Administrator of TRICARE on the board of Elevance today, and among others, and the head of research at Center for Social Dynamics. And so there's a great extended team. I think everyone wants to see not only the company succeed, but succeed the right way, that we're building products that move the needle, that we're in it to improve the lives of kids. And so that has to be kind of the start and end of what we do.
Well, that's an amazing team that you built around to be able to empower the product. And I mean, so you started out with virtual reality in the autism industry at the nascent. And you just piqued my interest a second ago with the fact that now there's some AI involvement within the product. I'd love to hear what it is that AI is driving. Is it driving progression of your goals? Is it driving the actual curriculum and what you're seeing in the VR device? How does AI work within Florio?
Yeah. So there's 3 areas of focus for AI. The first and kind of the easiest to get your head around is we're
been
in the
leaning.
content business. We're creating content, and AI is creating opportunities to speed up the types of content we create, to simplify the process of adapting content to the types of life situations we're doing. And so, I think in the next 3 years, we're already using AI in some really important ways, such as around, voicing the characters and creating the environmental art, but that's going to rapidly expand over the next 3 years. And one of the areas that I think is particularly important is being able to, over time, further and further personalize the environments to meet the client's environments where they are. The second is that we have 5 years of data now on how therapists are choosing to use Florio with kids of different backgrounds for different skill goals. And we have trained an LLM on a large language model on those choices, combined with knowledge of our 200 plus lessons and what those therapeutic goals are. The end result, which is available to all Florio customers, is a chat interface that allows you to type or cut and paste a parent testimonial or a snippet of a neuropsych and get not only a list of recommended lessons, but the why of why each lesson is appropriate to what was described, which is also handy, then can be adapted quickly in other note-taking type functions that the individual might be going through. We give you an instant path to save that as a lesson plan and apply that lesson plan to one or more of the kids on your caseload so that you can put it to flight immediately. All of this is done in a style, knowing the ABA model specifically, that to enable a BCBA to do that and hand it off to their RBTs, it might be implementing Florio on the field. And so that workflow is really important too. The third, and in my mind, by far the most exciting, is that we are developing conversational AI therapy in Florio. And so today there are 2 lessons available where we have characters, Jordan Marcy, who are AI personaed characters that are available for direct interaction with the child. So we use voice recognition in the VR headset, enabling the child to be able to speak to the character. The character is able to listen and respond with underlying goals in mind around building out conversation, advice on making friends. The characters can help with interviewing for jobs or working on different day-to-day tasks. And so they're able to go deep on subjects that the learner might be really interested in. Obviously, in our community, we have kids who often have extremely deep interests and quickly overwhelm the expertise of the therapists to have conversation around those. And so those are incredible opportunities to use AI to meet them where they are, engage them, but then be able to help them scaffold from there to broader skills around showing empathy and reciprocation and some of these key facets of what we think really help in development.
That is an absolutely amazing step within the field and within the technology. I remember several years ago is that when you and I had spoken, this is like the one dream item that I had. It's a concept that's hard to be able to teach because everything's so scripted when you're thinking about therapeutic models. And if you can take VR and make it so that it's more natural in that progression of language responses and having to kind of pivot and read body language to be able to understand nuance and intonation and everything like that. Those are high level skills that it's tough to find the right teaching environment for. So I applaud the fact that you all have gotten to that point where you're able to truly immerse that experience. Is the AI set up in a way where it's really complementary to the BCBA or to the teacher, so that they should really be guiding the process still, but using that as a tool to kind of understand a natural progression and how to be able to advance things?
So right now, it's built in the Florio model where there's an adult that's able to observe and provide live coaching to the child. There's room to evolve this to better incorporate. So one of the features, for instance, we're working on right now is that the interaction with the AI character is only done verbally. And so it can be confusing because for the coach or the BCBA to step in and possibly redirect the AI character, they have to talk to the AI character while the child is potentially talking to the AI character. So that can lead to some confusing interactions. What we're working on ways to create a back channel to the character so that in real time, the BCBA could type out a message saying, hey, can you guide the child this way? And the character will take that into account and apply it in real time as the child is having the conversation. So I think those are opportunities to embrace the fact that we do, in Florio, we believe that having a live adult present and participating is beneficial to the child rather than being self-directed. There will be opportunities in the future to create self-directed therapies that are effective and additive to the services that a child is receiving. But our focus right now is really on that, giving the therapist superpowers.
And I mean, just when you say in the future, I feel like in technology, you blink and you're automatically into the future. So a lot of these things are probably on the horizon relatively soon to be able to kind of come out, would be my guess. But I am sure you have your own map on how to get there. But I had a question on, you said that the product brings the world of the child, and we all live in different places. I'm out in a rural area. You might be in a suburb or city. It's how do you change the material that's going in or the environment to be able to make sure that it matches what's going to be important to that child? Because crossing the street out in a rural area, of course, is so different than in a city. So how does that work? How are you able to kind of adjust to this is the real life that the child needs to learn these skills in?
Yeah, this is an area where AI is going to help power a lot of the future content we develop. I mean, right now, when we're developing content, we are, taking on the costs of 3D artists and, designs that, we can't do 15 of these for every gradation of urban, suburban, rural environment, and then also scale that potentially to other countries. Because Florio right now is used in, 12, 13 countries. So there's a lot of tailoring for the future that's needed to make this as effective as possible. And we think generative AI is going to create a lot of that basis to do that. And similarly, I would say that the characters that you interact with, same thing, that, if you're in a, mostly African-American environment and your school is all African-American, I think the best types of situational training and therapy around how to develop play skills is going to be around characters that reflect that environment, that use any cultural dialects that reflect language in that environment, and that the more we can do, the more we're helping stimulate the real world to create that practice.
And that's such a huge benefit. When I started out in the field, I believe that every single piece of stimuli, every single flashcard looked the exact same. And it did not represent what's going to be natural for everybody's environments. It was hard for a child to generalize. And what you're describing and the flexibility of being able to create an immersive environment that has meaning to an individual, I think it's so powerful and so important.
And going one step further, when if you look out, like say 3 years, and the technologies we have in our hands today, we're not that far off that you could replicate and create avatar versions of a family, avatar versions of friends, incorporate those into the therapy so that they're incorporated in, so that if you're trying to learn certain, home-based skills, that your family members are represented, your house is represented in the layout, your school is represented, that you're learning these skills in the context of that environment. We're not that far off. I think the technology will be ahead of the types of research and validation needed, and obviously plugging in new technology into our healthcare system and ensuring that the mechanisms for how the healthcare system works, including reimbursement, end up being important.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit, just because what you're describing sounds like it's going to be beneficial for I mean, it's a clinical ABA program all the way to parent support, all the way to an education system. But the barrier historically has been, how do you get this paid for? Like, everybody might want to use it, but you got to figure out that mechanism. What's that look like now?
Yeah, there's been some really good progress on a couple of fronts. So the first area that we've made progress is around Medicaid waivers, that Florio today is covered in a half dozen states, including Wisconsin and Tennessee, through the waiver program. In Wisconsin, through the Childhood Long-Term Services waiver, families can get the full system in the home covered with hardware, and then it's treated like a prescription order through a HCPCS code. Similarly, in Tennessee, there's self-directed waiver dollars through the MCOs and Medicaid that can be leveraged for Florio. And so we're looking to grow that. That creates a lot of parent access. It also creates more opportunities to supplement professional care with home-based approach. The big area that we've made a lot of progress on in the context of autism therapy clinics and ABA is around a CPT-3 code that our little company 3 years ago presented to the American Medical Association as a model for how virtual reality could be seen as a practice expense and augment several parent therapy. Don't want to confuse the word parent here, but essentially with therapy codes commonly used for mental, behavioral, speech, OT therapy. So, so for instance, ABA therapy clinics commonly use the 97153 code for RBT hours, and we created a new code that can travel as a second line item on the bill to allow the clinic to say, this is my practice expense per session for using VR to augment the therapy. The good news is that in the last year, and we designed the code so that it could be used not just by Florio, but by other virtual reality products that touched speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. And what's really exciting is that the therapy codes now are being more and more authorized by payers. So, something that we're going to be raising awareness of over the next few months is that in the last year, a number of payers have added this code to the fee schedule. And unbeknownst to, I think, most ABA clinics, they already have authorization from some major payers on the code at quite usable rates for what their purposes would be. And so we've been collecting this data. The data is now public through the price transparency actions that have happened over the last couple of years, where provider payer contracts are published and accessible so that for any given CPT code what rate a particular payer is paying a particular provider. So that transparency data has allowed us to take a look at the specific CPT code, which is 0770T, and be able to see that there are thousands of healthcare providers that have authorization on their fee schedule for the code, that we know what the rates are, which states they're in, and that we can see that a lot of the traction that has pushed the code into more general acceptance has happened, I think, thanks to areas outside of autism around stroke rehabilitation and audiology, that there have been innovations there that have helped move the whole technology forward in a way that's going to be beneficial for the autism clinic world.
Well, we'll definitely have to share that code within this podcast so that people can have that as a reference to go double check and look at their own fee schedules. But one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of the technologies, a lot of the treatments and care models that exist for the autistic community are beneficial beyond the care for autism. What's the benefit that you've seen, or what other, diagnostic conditions or different areas of support do you see Florio Tech being able to serve right now?
Yeah, so the Florio Autism VR system that's in use today is used in a number of schools and school districts. And there you can actually see, because the clientele of a special education department of a school district is far more diverse than, say, an ABA clinic from a diagnosis standpoint. That the Florio system is being used with kids with anxiety, with ADHD, with schizophrenia, with bipolar conditions, PTSD, because the scenario-based teaching style can be applied more broadly than simply looking at it in the context of the autism spectrum. And so we see the utility of the system being used more broadly. And now it's about how can this be made generally accessible and available with the appropriate amounts of research.
Okay. So Vijay, one of the benefits that I see almost as a something that you don't see right in front of our faces, but is extremely powerful, is the empowerment of families. So if I were to look at a parent, and in a typical therapeutic model is that sometimes they're not as informed, they're not as engaged, they don't have as many opportunities. Have you seen or have you heard feedback from families on how Florio has given them more opportunity to be a part of the treatment and care models?
We have, and I think it's a really great point. Something I experienced personally, which is that, I have the willingness and time and to want to do more, but I lack the training and tools to do that. And in many cases, I think parents get turned into glorified Uber drivers, where instead they have all this potential to be doing more. And so where we have the most hands-on experience is through the Wisconsin Medicaid waiver program, where we have families utilizing Florio, and some of the families are in difficult situations where it's impractical to get to the clinics for one reason or another. And so the feedback from these families has been, just really great, because they're able to see the child make progress firsthand as they go through these lessons. They're able to work on the lessons they care about. But I almost think above and beyond the skill teaching, the bond we're helping them build with their kids is worth even more. And so there's a lot of opportunity to activate parents in ways that are completely beneficial and additive to their relationship with professional clinics that they're working with. I don't see this as either or. I don't see it as cannibalizing. I see it as you're trying to lift a boat as high as it can go, and that all tides will help there. And so there's a lot of opportunity. We actually, in response to customer feedback from clinics, are going to be announcing an incentive program as well soon for clinics to offer subscriptions to parents who want to add to what they're doing at home. And there's tremendous opportunity at home. They can work on weekends. They can work on it on hours that they wouldn't be able to get the services for, and so they can take it on vacations. They can apply it to summer situations that are all often non-standard and disruptive to regular therapy visitation. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and we have focused on skill building that gets to home situations that are important. So swimming pool safety, something we just released, really important. For older kids, putting away your groceries, where should they go? So I think one of the things I know as a parent can be a struggle is adding chores and some of the personal responsibility goals that families want their kids to take on, but can seem very daunting when they're in our situations, not wanting to add to the load, so to speak. But the pride that the child feels if they actually take those things on can be quite huge and motivating. And so being able to teach some of those skills as well, we think can be really helpful.
And what's the feedback loop for a parent as well? Because it sounds like the clinician and a parent can see similar responses, can be a part of that same sort of opportunity to engage the child or to sit back and observe. Is that feedback opportunity something that's highlighted as far as
we're working on, not all that we want to have working is working yet, but where we are today is that the data can be shared between what's being done in the home versus what's being done in the clinic, so that the clinician can view everything. That where we want to get to is that the clinician could potentially be creating the lesson plan and assigning it as homework to the parent, so that the parent has a basis to use that. Parents have been the most responsive to the new AI chatbot features for recommending lessons, because they're the ones often who don't have a well-established curriculum they're leaning back on, or pedagogy that they're using in the way that professional clinics are. So, a parent can just ask, my child needs help in the following way, and have, the Florio AI respond and say, well, these are the 6 lessons you should try, and here's why. That's a really great capability that we've added. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity to create kind of that tandem of parent and professional sharing and lifting each other up. I think the next generation of that, because I think this is where, this such a complex environment, especially that we have, is that really you want the school district and the clinic and the parent to all be talking to each other in concert. And in many cases, there's multiple therapists involved, because a child might be getting speech OT and ABA and going to school, getting things through an IEP. The parent has time, right? So eventually where we should get to, and this shouldn't be limited to just where Florio and VR is being used, but more in general, is that, we need to be sharing all these things. Right now, we put so much on parents to be able to have to quarterback all this.
Yeah. That's stressful. I mean, it's not asked for in many other healthcare environments, where it is the parent that's involved with being able to share every single clinical input, or every educational input, and every social input into the program. So, I mean, I've heard today the benefits of curriculum generation. I've heard the immersive environment benefits. I've heard that parents can get more empowered, more involved. I mean, the ability to be able to generalize things, everything it's so positive, but it does take some advocacy to say, I'd love to have this as part of my program. So where can the listeners learn more about Florio, get involved, or feel like, hey, you know what, here's the information to share to your school, to your clinic?
Yeah, so if you go to floriovr.com, FLOREOVR.com, there's pathways for both families and for clinicians and educators to learn more about the product, be able to sign up, learn about the different equipment options that exist, and then we encourage to share the information with your professionals. It might be right for you as a family to want to try it out at home. It might be easier and more practical for you to guide a school or a clinic to check it out. We embrace both, all of those different opportunities, and we believe the product can be beneficial in all 3 settings.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today and exploring everything that Florio has to offer. And I encourage folks to try and figure out ways to make it a component of whatever care model is in place, because there's going to be a benefit for every environment. There's going to be a benefit for every teaching pedagogy that's out there to be able to incorporate it, because there's pieces of VR and AI that will enhance any sort of learning curriculum. I'd love to give you just the opportunity to just share one last time how VR and AI continue to shape the field, and give us some takeaways from that.
Yeah. So what we see today is that there's significant investment in virtual and mixed reality technologies that are manifesting in new hardware like the Apple Vision Pro, the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and a bunch of things in between, including the highly affordable MetaQuest 3S headset, which you can have for $300 essentially. Powerful technology for that kind of price. That the these mixed reality and virtual reality technologies are going to continue to get more lightweight. They're going to come down in cost. They're going to get more and more realistic in the types of animations they can deliver, and they're going to be very comfortable. Meanwhile, what we see with AI is that with generative AI, we have at our hands the abilities to create rapidly new content, that we have the ability to provide, detailed advice that's personalized on how best to utilize, in our case, our growing lesson catalog of over 200 lessons and counting, that we can really fill in also the knowledge gaps of the adult that's working with the child around what's most appropriate and why. And then finally, that there's an opportunity to create a whole new class of therapy that's highly responsive, that's literally listening to the child, that's able to engage and converse with the child on the subjects that the child cares about, that's able to then apply that and actually incorporate a therapeutic growth model to those conversations so that the child grows in new skills, whether it's elongating conversation, showing social reciprocity, learning a new skill, that there's a whole new level of engagement that's around the corner.
Mm-hmm. And each piece of that is only going to help support the growth of a child and the ability for them to be able to contribute in whatever way they want to contribute in the world around them, which is the goal. That's the goal of every parent. That's the goal of every clinician, and that's the goal of every individual. So thank you again, Vijay. I appreciate the time that you gave us today to be able to share your story.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.